Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, walking out to your front porch, and, well, realizing that everything you thought you knew about your neighborhood was a complete fabrication.
Oh man, that would be incredibly disorienting.
Right. Like you've spent your entire life believing your house was the exact center of the world, a cozy, secure place, built specifically for you by a grand designer who was always watching over you.
A very comforting thought, yeah.
It is. But then suddenly the sky cracks open, you look up, and you discover you are actually living on a tiny, completely insignificant fleck of mud.
Just hurtling through a cold, endless, dark void.
Exactly. And how would that change your understanding of your own significance? I mean, how would you even go about living your life after that?
It would fundamentally break you, wouldn't it? Because you aren't just losing your address in that scenario, you are losing the entire narrative of why you exist at all.
And that psychological shockwave is exactly what we are tracing in today's deep dive. We are exploring what happens to the human psyche when our foundational understanding of the universe just gets completely shattered.
It's a massive topic.
It really is. We're pulling from this phenomenal, comprehensive text called Modern Thinkers and Present Problems by Edgar A. Singer.
Such a great source.
Yeah. Our mission today is to start in the 16th century with the astronomer Giordano Bruno, the man who first really opened up that terrifying infinite cosmos. And then we'll track how generations of brilliant minds have desperately tried to rebuild human meaning, morality, and identity in the aftermath of that discovery.
So to really understand the trauma of this paradigm shift, we kind of have to look at what Bruno destroyed.
Set the scene for us.
Right. So before him, humanity lived in what we call the Aristotelian or Dantean universe. And it was incredibly comforting, Think of it like a cosmic snow globe.
Oh, a snow globe. I like that analogy.
Yeah, so the Earth was the fixed, immovable center. And it was surrounded by these pristine, crystalline, celestial spheres, ordered like a giant, purposeful clockwork.
Everything had a place.
Exactly. And just beyond those spheres was the Empyrean, the literal dwelling place of God and the angels.
So humanity was the undeniable focal point. I mean, the whole thing was essentially a divine workshop designed solely to produce and test the human soul.
That is the core of it, yes. But then Bruno comes along, building on the mathematics of Copernicus, and he completely shatters that snow globe.
Because he looks further.
Right. He doesn't just say the Earth moves around the sun. He looks up and realizes that the stars are actually other suns. And, well, if they are other suns, space doesn't have a boundary.
There's no glass on the snow globe.
No outer sphere at all. The universe is infinite.
Okay, let's unpack the psychological consequence of that because it's genuinely devastating. If space is infinite, with millions of suns and potentially millions of other planets, the Earth isn't the center of anything.
It's just a random coordinate.
Yeah. As our source text puts it, man is suddenly reduced to living on a, quote, fleck of mud rolling around a bubble of gas.
The intellectual trauma really begins right there. Because if we aren't the physical center of the universe, are we still the center of the divine plot?
Right. Did God create all those other worlds too?
Exactly. Did a savior have to be sacrificed on every single one of those infinite planets to redeem their inhabitants? Bruno basically destroyed the distinction between heaven and earth.
And if heaven is everywhere, or I guess nowhere, the entire human-centric drama of salvation is thrown into a massive crisis.
It is. It's like realizing your childhood hometown isn't the entire world, but suddenly being dropped into the middle of an infinite ocean without a compass.
Okay, but wait. If you're Bruno, and you've just realized we're floating aimlessly in this infinite dark ocean, how do you not just spiral into pure nihilism?
That's the big question.
Yeah, I mean, if Bruno proved we aren't the center of God's plot, did people start wondering if there was a plot at all? Did he actually have a way to cope with this void he uncovered?
He did, actually. He proposed something radical for the time, which was pantheism. His famous phrase was natura est deus in rebus, which means nature is God in things.
So instead of God sitting on a throne just outside the universe, God is the universe.
That's the idea. Bruno argued that the divine pervaded this new infinite space. The exact same life force that beats in your heart is the life force that moves the distant stars.
That's oddly beautiful.
It was supposed to be a comforting life raft, yeah. A way to rescue spirituality by expanding it to fill the infinite void.
I'm guessing the 16th century authorities didn't see it as a life raft, though.
No, they saw it as flat-out heresy. And we see the tragedy of this in Bruno's own life. He spent 16 years wandering Europe as a refugee, enthusiastically preaching this new cosmic gospel.
But he couldn't run forever.
Right. Eventually, he was lured back to Venice and betrayed by his host, a man named Giovanni Mocenigo. Mocenigo locked Bruno in a room and denounced him to the Inquisition.
Oh, wow. Reading the source text account of that trial is genuinely harrowing.
Yeah.
You see this intense psychological whiplash in him.
It's very sad.
Yeah, Bruno goes from being this bold, cosmic pioneer, claiming to have swept the air, pierced the heavens, sped by the stars, to just a terrified man on his knees before his judges.
The fear must have been overwhelming.
He makes a desperate recantation. He begs for mercy. He essentially abandons his great idea.
It shows how terrifying this new infinite void was, even to the man who discovered it. Of course, the surrender didn't save him in the end. He was burned at the stake in Rome in 1600.
His intellectual surrender really highlights the gravity of the shift, I think. If there's no center and no edge, it makes you wonder how anyone could continue to believe there was a script we were all supposed to be following.
And that realization is exactly what spawned the next major worldview. Because Bruno removed the center of the universe, the thinkers who followed had to figure out how this vast, decentralized space actually operated.
Right, without a divine script.
Exactly. And they arrived at a concept that was perhaps even colder than the infinite void, the mechanical universe. This brings us to Benedict of Spinoza in the 17th century.
So Spinoza looks at this infinite expanse and concludes it's not a divine stage play, it's just a giant machine. Like, how does a universe work if it doesn't have a plot?
Well, Spinoza, who was heavily influenced by Descartes in geometry, argued that the universe has no overarching emotional purpose. It isn't aimed at making us happy or punishing us.
It just exists.
Yes. Everything follows from the eternal nature of the universe just as strictly and necessarily as the properties of a triangle follow from the definition of a triangle.
Okay, let's pause there, because that triangle analogy is huge. The triangle doesn't, choose to have its interior angles add up to 180 degrees.
No, it just does.
Right, it's an inevitable fact of what it is. So Spinoza is saying human life and everything that happens to us operates with that exact same inescapable math.
Yes, exactly. And Spinoza is ruthless in his critique of popular religion because of this. He argued that human beings arrogantly project their own desires onto reality.
Give us an example of that.
Sure. So because we have eyes for seeing, we assume eyes were made for seeing by a creator. Because the sun gives light and grows our crops, we assume someone put the sun there specifically for us.
We make ourselves the main characters again.
Exactly. Spinoza said this is an illusion born of our ignorance of true causes. If a stone falls off a roof and kills a man, people assume it was the will of God punishing him.
Right, they try to find a reason.
They will ask a million why questions until they reach the quote-unquote will of God. Spinoza famously called this reliance on the will of God the asylum of ignorance.
The universe doesn't care about you, it just ticks. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. The social consequences of believing you are just a cog in a machine.
It can be incredibly dangerous. The source text highlights this brilliantly with a novel by Paul Bourget called Le Disciple. It illustrates the extreme danger of taking this determinism to its logical social conclusion.
What happens in the book?
The story follows a young man, Robert Greslew, who reads a Spinoza-like philosopher and adopts this cold, mechanical worldview.
Right. He decides his own human emotions are nothing more than a physics experiment governed by inevitable laws.
He views himself as a soul of prey. He systematically seduces a young woman, not out of passion, but as a calculated psychological vivisection.
Just to see how she works.
Exactly. He treats her mind like a machine he can dismantle, ultimately driving her to suicide. And when he is caught, he writes to his old philosopher mentor and basically says, "You can't blame me."
Because he didn't have a choice.
Right. He says, "I am just a sum of my elements. The future is contained in the present, like the properties of a triangle. I was necessitated to do this."
That is absolutely chilling. He uses the physics of the universe as a get-out-of-jail-free card for being a sociopath.
Yeah.
But did Spinoza actually believe that? I mean, that morality just vanishes.
Spinoza didn't think morality vanished, no, but he radically redefined it. For Spinoza, true freedom isn't having the free will to choose between A and B. Freedom is understanding the absolute necessity of all things.
So just accepting your fate.
More like aligning with it. When you realize that the pain you suffer or the events of the world are an inevitable part of the eternal order, you stop fighting it with bitter passion. You align your mind with the universe.
And that brings peace.
Yes, that intellectual understanding brings what he called blessedness.
But I have to challenge that on behalf of anyone listening right now. If I'm just a mechanical clock ticking away exactly as I was built to, How can I be a good clock or a bad clock?
That's the central dilemma.
Doesn't this mechanical universe totally destroy the very idea of right and wrong, regardless of how much blessedness you feel by accepting it?
You've hit on the exact crisis that the next wave of philosophers had to solve. Spinoza's machine world threatened to eliminate actionable morality entirely.
Right, because why try to be good?
Exactly. If everything is necessitated, telling someone they ought to have done something else is mathematically absurd. So thinkers like David Hume and Immanuel Kant had to launch these emergency rescue missions.
They had to figure out why humans should still be good in a universe that doesn't inherently care about goodness. So how does someone like Hume try to rescue morality without bringing God back into the picture?
Well, Hume was an empiricist. He rejected the idea that we can prove any divine plot at all, so he looked strictly at human experience. Hume argued that morality is simply based on utility.
Utility. Like
Usefulness. Exactly. We praise things that are useful or agreeable to ourselves and others. We have a natural human sympathy. We feel pain when others feel pain, and joy when they feel joy.
so we invent moral rules because they are just practical for living together.
That's it.
I like to think of Hume's morality like a traffic light. It's just a highly useful human invention. It keeps us from crashing into each other at the intersection. There's nothing divine about the red light. It's just practical utility.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. But Immanuel Kant looked at Hume's traffic light and found it completely inadequate. Kant argued that if you are only doing good to get a good result, what he called a hypothetical imperative, then you aren't really being moral. If you tell the truth just because it's useful for society today, what happens tomorrow when lying becomes more useful?
The traffic light stops working if everyone decides it's more practical to ignore it.
Exactly. Kant insisted that true morality must be a categorical imperative. It must be a duty that you do unconditionally, regardless of the consequences. For Kant, the only inherently good thing in the entire universe is a goodwill.
Okay, but to make this strict absolute morality function, Kant has to perform a massive philosophical magic trick, right?
He really does. He realizes that doing your duty often leads to suffering in the real world. So to ensure that morality isn't just a pointless joke, he says we have to postulate three things:
And what are those?
freedom, immortality, and God. We have to assume we are free, otherwise duty is meaningless. We have to assume immortality because becoming perfectly moral takes more than a single lifetime. We have to assume God to ensure that eventually, in some cosmic realm, virtue is actually rewarded with happiness.
Wait a second. Kant says we can't prove any of this through science, but we just have to assume it to make his rules work.
Pretty much, yeah.
It sounds like he is just terrified of the infinite void Bruno uncovered. Isn't Kant just desperately trying to force the comforts of the old father's house back into a universe that no longer supports it?
Many critics felt that Kant's postulates were exactly that: a leap of faith designed to soothe the anxiety of the modern condition. He couldn't handle the abyss, so he built a moral bridge over it.
And that brings us to the thinkers who absolutely refuse to walk on that bridge.
Yes. Philosophers who looked at the raw engine of nature, stared straight into the abyss, and decided there was no moral framework there at all, only an endless, brutal struggle.
Enter Arthur Schopenhauer, the ultimate pessimist.
Schopenhauer looks at the world and says the inner reality of the universe isn't a divine mind, and it isn't Kant's moral law. It is a blind, restless, irrational force he calls the will.
And because this will is constantly striving and never satisfied, life is fundamentally suffering.
That is the core of his pessimism.
Our sources describe Schopenhauer's view of life as swinging like a pendulum. On one side is the pain of wanting something you don't have. You strive, you fight, you suffer for it.
And then the pendulum swings.
Right. Once you finally get the thing you wanted, you experience the empty boredom, the ennui of having it and realizing it didn't actually fulfill you. So you just find a new thing to desire, and the painful swing starts all over again.
It's a relentless cycle. And consider how Schopenhauer views nature itself. He doesn't see a harmonious ecosystem. He sees a slaughterhouse.
A slaughterhouse.
Yeah, every creature fights for space and time. The will to live is constantly preying upon itself. The animal kingdom eats the vegetable kingdom. Beasts eat other beasts. And humans subdue everything, eventually turning on each other.
It's incredibly bleak. Does he offer any way out of this slaughterhouse?
Yeah. Only two grim solutions. First, a temporary escape through art and the contemplation of beauty, where we briefly step off the pendulum and forget our individual desires.
And the second?
The ultimate escape through asceticism. He suggests we must turn against the will entirely. We must literally starve the will to live, reject all bodily desires, and seek a kind of total detachment.
But staring into that same brutal slaughterhouse led Friedrich Nietzsche to the exact opposite conclusion, didn't it?
It did. Nietzsche takes Schopenhauer's premise of a brutal, striving world and reacts violently against the pessimism.
How so?
Well, Nietzsche was heavily influenced by the new scientific paradigm of his time, which was Darwin's theory of organic evolution. Where Schopenhauer saw only senseless, cruel struggle, Nietzsche saw a mechanism for progress.
So if life is a brutal war for survival, then that war has a goal.
Exactly. The goal is the production of a higher being. Nietzsche argued that man is something to be overcome. The goal of the earth isn't peace, or Kant's moral duty, or Schopenhauer's ascetic withdrawal.
It's the Superman, right? The Übermensch.
Yes. And to get there, Nietzsche demands a complete inversion of our values. He looks at traditional virtues like pity, charity, and self-sacrifice, and he calls them vices.
He calls pity a vice.
Yeah, to him, pity is a disease because it preserves the weak and holds back the evolutionary progress of the human race. Nietzsche's philosophy is a radical egoism.
That's intense.
He argues that the greatest figures in history, the ones who drove humanity forward, were all pitiless egoists who imposed their will on the world. To him, the morality of the mob, which seeks the greatest happiness for the greatest number, is a morality of decadence. We must embrace the chaotic, aggressive struggle and forge our own power.
But I have to push back hard on this. If we adopt this aggressive Superman mentality just to cope with our cosmic insignificance, aren't we just replacing the cold cruelty of the universe with our own human cruelty?
That is the risk, certainly.
I mean, how does becoming a pitiless egoist actually solve the psychological crisis of being alive? It seems like a recipe for a horrific society.
Your concern is completely valid, and it's the exact problem with Nietzsche's vision. It requires an almost sociopathic disregard for others, which is fundamentally incompatible with the human need for community and connection.
We can't all be Robert Greslow from the novel.
Right. So if Schopenhauer's path of withdrawal is too depressing, and Nietzsche's path of domination is too destructive, we are left at a crossroads. If the universe won't hand us a prepackaged meaning, and if raw evolutionary power isn't a fulfilling answer, what is left?
That brings us to the threshold of the modern era. We arrive at pragmatism, championed by thinkers like William James. And pragmatism completely shifts the entire rulebook of this centuries-long debate.
It does. For centuries, philosophers were realists. They believed truth was something already out there, hidden in the universe, and our job was just to uncover it.
Like digging for fossils.
Exactly. But pragmatism says no. Truth isn't something you find. Truth is something you make.
How do you just make truth? That sounds like a contradiction, you know?
William James introduces the idea of the will to believe. He argues that we are not passive observers sitting in a laboratory taking notes on a dead universe. We are active participants.
We have to meet the universe halfway.
Right. If believing in a moral order helps you live a more effective, courageous, and meaningful life, then that belief becomes practically true for you through your actions. The consequences of the belief make it real.
The source text describes this as a shift from natural religion to human religion. We stop looking for God's fingerprints in the physical laws of nature, and instead we build our own ideals through our actions.
We engineer our own purpose.
Yeah, we use scientific progress not just to observe, but to actually engineer a kingdom of nature subdued. Even if modern physics tells us the physical universe is ultimately destined millions of years from now to decay into a cold, tideless inert void.
Pragmatism insists that the fight to build meaning right now is inherently worthwhile.
But if pragmatism says we are just making up our own truth as we go, does it actually carry any weight when things get hard? It feels like we are building a beautiful house of cards, but it's still resting on Bruno's tiny fleck of mud.
It's the ultimate existential tension, for sure. But pragmatism would argue that the ship is the only ship we have. The fact that we build the life support systems ourselves, that we paint the walls ourselves, doesn't make the ship meaningless, it makes it ours.
The effort itself is the meaning.
Exactly. The meaning is found in the architecture, in the effort, in the human collaboration required to keep it functioning against the cosmic winds. We stop asking, what is the meaning of life, and start asking, how can I make my life meaningful?
As we synthesize this incredible journey, I want you, the listener, to think about your own daily life. When you feel overwhelmed today by the dizzying scale of scientific progress, the endless flood of information,
or the debates over human identity and technology.
right, realize that you're experiencing the exact same psychological shockwaves that Giordano Bruno set off in the 16th century. We are all still trying to figure out how to live in the infinite space he opened up. We are still trying to rebuild a sense of home in the void.
And that modern technological push brings up a profound question to end on. If pragmatism tells us that meaning is created purely through human action, and if our scientific progress continues to extend our power over nature exponentially, where does it end?
Will there come a point in the distant future where humanity evolves from simply trying to understand the cosmos to literally becoming the ultimate purposeful will that the philosophers spent centuries searching for?
If we survive long enough, do we eventually engineer our own divine plot?
It's a staggering thought. But for now, as you walk out onto your porch tomorrow morning and look up at the sky, remember this. You might be standing on a tiny fleck of mud hurtling through a cold void, but you are a fleck of mud that can look back at the void and demand a reason why.
And maybe you'll be the one to find it.
Maybe you are the one who gets to write the answer. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.